The calculated choice. A South Carolina inmate faces the firing squad. The sterile white walls of death row hold secrets, regrets, and the chilling countdown to a final, irreversible act. But what happens when an inmate, staring into the abyss, gets to choose the method of their own demise? Mikal Mahdi, convicted of a brutal crime, has made that choice, selecting the firing squad in a state grappling with its own troubled history of capital punishment. This isn't just about one man's fate. It's a stark reflection of our justice system, its flaws, and the moral complexities that haunt us. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. In 2004, the town of Orangeburg, South Carolina, was shattered by a senseless act of violence. Public safety officer James Myers, a man sworn to protect and serve, was ambushed, riddled with bullets, and his body callously burned. The perpetrator, Mikal Mahdi, pleaded guilty to this heinous crime, setting in motion a legal process that has now culminated in a scheduled execution date of April 11th. The details of the murder are gruesome, a stark reminder of the brutality that exists within our society. Myers' death was not a spur-of-the-moment act. It was a calculated assault, leaving a community reeling and a family forever scarred. This is the backdrop against which Mahdi's choice, and the state's response, must be viewed. Faced with the grim options of lethal injection, the electric chair, or the firing squad, Mahdi chose the latter. His reasoning, as reported, was that it represented the lesser of three evils. This chilling phrase speaks volumes about the perceived inhumanity of the other methods and the desperation of a man facing his own mortality. The electric chair, with its history of botched executions and agonizing deaths, is widely considered a barbaric relic. Lethal injection, while seemingly more humane, has been plagued by shortages of necessary drugs and the potential for prolonged suffering. In this context, the firing squad, despite its own inherent violence, becomes a calculated choice, a desperate attempt to exert some control over the final moments. The execution itself is a clinical, almost surreal process. Mahdi will be strapped to a chair, a mere 15 feet from the firing squad. 3 prison employees, volunteers in this macabre task, will aim their rifles at a target placed on his chest. Each rifle will be loaded with a live round, designed to shatter upon impact, ensuring a swift and decisive end. This is not a scene from a historical drama. It is a contemporary reality in the United States. The cold precision of the procedure stands in stark contrast to the chaotic violence of the crime that led to this moment. It is a reminder that even in the act of taking a life, the state seeks to maintain order and control. Firing squad executions are a rarity in the United States. In the past 50 years, only 3 other inmates, all in Utah, have met their end in this manner. The last such execution occurred in 2010, highlighting the unusual nature of Mahdi's choice and South Carolina's willingness to employ this method. The historical context is important. Firing squads were once a more common form of execution, but they have gradually fallen out of favor as societies have sought more humane methods. The resurgence of this practice in South Carolina raises uncomfortable questions about the state's commitment to evolving standards of decency. As the execution date looms, Mahdi's lawyers have filed a final appeal with the state's highest court. Their argument centers on the inadequacy of his initial defense, which they claim lasted a mere 30 minutes. They assert that crucial mitigating evidence, including the impact of months spent in isolation as a juvenile on his brain development, was never presented. The claim of inadequate defense is a serious one, striking at the heart of the American justice system. If Mahdi was not afforded a fair trial, if crucial evidence was suppressed, then his conviction and subsequent death sentence are fundamentally unjust. This is not simply about sparing a life. It is about upholding the principles of due process and equal protection under the law. The prosecution, unsurprisingly, paints a different picture. They argue that Mahdi had ample opportunity to present evidence during a 2011 appeal, which was ultimately rejected. They emphasize the violent nature of his crimes, including the murder of a convenience store clerk in North Carolina and a possible connection to 2 other deaths in Virginia. The prosecution's narrative is one of a man with a long history of violence, a danger to society who deserves to be held accountable for his actions. They argue that the death penalty is a just punishment for such heinous crimes, and that Mahdi's execution will bring closure to the victims and their families. Mahdi's last hope rests with the governor of South Carolina, who has the power to grant clemency and reduce his sentence to life in prison without parole. However, clemency is a rare occurrence in the state, with no governor having offered it since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. The governor's decision is a weighty one, balancing the demands of justice with the potential for mercy. It is a moment that tests the very soul of the state, forcing it to confront its own values and its commitment to both punishment and redemption. South Carolina has been on a grim streak in recent months, executing 4 inmates in the past 7 months. This surge in executions raises questions about the state's priorities and its willingness to embrace the death penalty at a time when many other states are moving away from it. The recent executions serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of capital punishment. Each execution represents a life extinguished, a family shattered, and a community grappling with the moral implications of state-sanctioned killing. Mahdi's case is not an isolated incident. It is part of a larger, ongoing debate about the death penalty in the United States. The debate encompasses questions of morality, justice, and the effectiveness of capital punishment as a deterrent to crime. It also raises concerns about racial bias, wrongful convictions, and the potential for cruel and unusual punishment. The death penalty is a deeply divisive issue, with strong arguments on both sides. However, it is essential that we engage in a thoughtful and informed discussion about its place in our society and whether it truly serves the interests of justice. The execution of Mikal Mahdi, regardless of your stance on the death penalty, demands a critical examination of our justice system. We must demand transparency and accountability from our legal institutions. Contact your state representatives and advocate for comprehensive reviews of capital cases, ensuring adequate defense and the consideration of mitigating circumstances. Support organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform, working to address systemic inequalities and prevent wrongful convictions. Educate yourself and others about the complexities of the death penalty, fostering informed discussions and challenging the status quo. Only through collective action can we strive for a more just and equitable system for all.